The first thing I noticed was how fast a room can agree to hate you. Not openly, not with votes, just with tiny signals. Someone's eyes flicking to someone else's mouth, waiting for permission to laugh. A fork pausing mid-air. A glass hovering near a lip. The kind of silence that isn't quiet, just crowded. I sat at Brielle's table under the warm glow of chandelier bulbs that tried too hard to look like candlelight, and I felt myself getting smaller in other people's minds. That sounds dramatic. It wasn't dramatic. It was procedural, like a decision being processed. Brielle liked to host. It gave her a stage without calling it a stage. She did everything in soft neutrals, glossy surfaces, and delicate plates that looked like they'd never survived a real argument. The centerpiece was arranged like a magazine cover. Her laugh was calibrated. Her compliments came with measurements. I'd worn what I always wore to family gatherings when I didn't want to fight. Dark jeans, clean boots, a plain button-down, neutral colors for a neutral man. A man designed not to offend. The funny part is, I was there because Lenora wanted me there. Lenora, Nori when she wanted to sound sweet, sat beside me, posture perfect, hair done the way she did it when she wanted strangers to think she had her life under control. She kept her phone face down like it had teeth. Every few minutes, it buzzed once, then again a moment later. Not calls, messages. The kind of messages you don't want anyone to accidentally see lighting up your screen. I told myself it was work. That's what you do when your instincts start tugging at you like a sleeve. You tell yourself you're being paranoid. You tell yourself you're tired. You tell yourself you're the kind of man who overthinks because he's not the kind of man who acts. Brielle floated around, pouring wine, touching shoulders, making sure the night felt special. Her eyes kept sliding past me like I was part of the furniture, not even the good furniture, the old piece you can't throw away yet. And then Soren arrived. He didn't enter like a man walking into someone else's home. He entered like a man arriving at a place he'd already purchased. Tall, expensive haircut, expensive teeth, expensive calm. He carried a bottle of wine like a prop, the kind that wasn't meant to be opened so much as displayed. Brielle's face changed the moment she saw him. That alone was information. Her smile widened too quickly, and she straightened like she'd just been reminded she had a spine. "Soren," she breathed, like his name had a taste. He kissed her cheek with a precision that felt rehearsed. Then he turned his attention to the table and let his gaze pass over everyone the way people inspect a hotel room. Quick scan, evaluate, decide what matters. When his eyes landed on me, he held them there a moment longer. "Gideon," Lenora said, a fraction too bright. "This is Soren." Soren's handshake was the kind that tries to teach you a lesson. Too firm, too long. The grin that comes with it says, "I do this to men like you." "Buddy," he said, like my name was optional. I smiled because that's what you do when you're trying not to be the problem. I'd done that smile in enough conference rooms and service entrances to know exactly how empty it looked. He took his seat with Brielle, and the table adjusted around him. Shoulders angled, laughter warmed up. People who'd been chewing slowed down so they could listen to him speak. Soren had that effect. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to be loud. He just needed to exist with confidence, and everyone else did the rest. Brielle poured him wine. Lenora offered a compliment about his jacket. Someone asked him about his watch. He answered every question like it was supposed to be asked. Then, inevitably, someone asked what he did. Soren leaned back slightly, crossing one ankle over the other, and said it the way men say things when they're used to their job being a weapon. Ravenport Development. Brielle's eyes lit like she'd just heard the name of a kingdom. "Wow," her father said, and it came out like a prayer. Soren nodded like it was normal for people to react that way. "We're moving a lot right now. Waterfront project, venue contracts, hospitality, logistics. We're tying down some big pieces." The room leaned toward him. Even the air seemed to. I watched Lenora out of habit. She smiled too quickly, too smoothly, like she'd practiced, like she was proud to sit near the orbit of a man like Soren, as if it reflected onto her. Then Soren's eyes drifted back to me. Just a casual return, the way a finger finds a bruise. "And you," he said, voice warm, "what do you do again?" Again, like I'd already told him and he'd filed me under not important. "I work in access control," I said. "Cameras, door systems, badge readers, that kind of thing." Soren's eyebrows lifted in a performance of interest. "So, you install cameras?" "Among other things." He chuckled softly, like I'd made a joke without realizing it. "That's honest work." The table laughed. Not hard, not cruel, not in a way that would make anyone feel guilty later. Just light laughter, safe laughter. Laughter that said, "Yes, we all understand where you sit in the hierarchy." I felt my face get warm, not with anger yet, with something worse, with being seen. Soren continued, and each sentence landed like a polite slap. "Must be nice, though, simple, clear. You do a job, you go home, no pressure, no stakeholders, no real fires to put out." I could have corrected him. I could have explained that my work was the kind of boring that keeps buildings from becoming headlines, that when access control fails, people get hurt, that it's not glamorous, but it matters. But explaining yourself at a table like that never works. It just makes you sound like you're begging the court to recognize your humanity. So I stayed quiet. Brielle watched me with a bright, hungry expression, like she was hoping I'd snap so she could call me dramatic. Lenora's knee brushed mine under the table, not a comfort, a warning. Then she leaned toward me, lips near my ear, her voice soft enough that no one else could hear. "Please don't embarrass everyone here." I didn't look at her. I kept my gaze on my plate, on the glossy sauce, on the polite portions, on the tiny sprig of green that existed purely to prove the food was fancy. "Embarrass everyone here. Not don't let him talk to you like that. Not I'm sorry. Not are you okay. Just don't make a scene. Don't disrupt the performance. Don't ruin the evening. Don't force anyone to choose sides." I swallowed and felt something in me settle. Not rage. Not yet. Something colder. Soren kept going because the table had rewarded him. "I mean, no offense," he said, smiling. "The universal sign for, I'm about to offend you. But people don't realize how hard it is at the top. When you're responsible for projects, payroll, investors, timelines, you can't afford weak links." His eyes held mine. Weak links. The laughter came again, a little louder this time. Someone made a sound like a cough that turned into a chuckle. Brielle's mother dabbed her mouth and smiled as if this was charming. Lenora smiled too. That was the part that stung. Not that she laughed, not that she let it happen, but that her smile looked relieved, as if she'd been afraid I'd do something, anything, that would force her to acknowledge me. Soren took a sip of wine. "We just brought on a new venue partner," he said. "Actually, it's a whole network. They needed upgrades, modernization, security. You know how it is. I had to push the team hard. People cut corners when they think nobody's watching." He said watching with a little emphasis, and the table laughed again because they thought it was clever. My fork paused mid-air. There are moments when someone says something that sounds like nothing to everyone else, but to you it clicks into a place that has been waiting. Venue upgrades, security, network, my world. I kept my expression neutral. I kept chewing. I kept being the harmless man they'd decided I was. But under the table, my fingers slid into my pocket. My phone was already there, cool against my palm. Familiar weight, familiar rectangle of glass and consequence. Soren continued talking, about growth, about pressure, about how some people weren't built for real responsibility, and I let his words wash over me like dirty water, because I wasn't listening to him anymore. I was listening to what his job title had just told me. Ravenport Development wasn't some abstract castle in the sky. Ravenport had contracts, Ravenport had compliance requirements. Ravenport had badges that had to be renewed. Ravenport had door logs that recorded every entry like a quiet witness. Ravenport had insurance clauses that didn't care how rich you were. And Ravenport, this was the important part, had hired my company for a series of upgrades and site integrations tied to their waterfront venue. I knew that because I'd been the one assigned to the ticket. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't classified, it wasn't secret. It was a work order. My thumb flicked the screen awake inside my pocket. I didn't even pull it out yet. I didn't want theatrics. I wanted certainty. The buzz of Lenora's phone happened again, once, then again, like someone tapping a code. I slowly pulled my phone out and placed it on my thigh, angled toward me. The screen glow was hidden by the tablecloth. Just me and the small square of light. I opened my work app. There it was. Ravenport Development. Waterfront Venue Phase 2. Under that, pending compliance review. Under that, temporary badge privileges expiring. The kind of thing that wasn't supposed to matter at a dinner table. The kind of thing only a few people cared about until suddenly they cared a lot. Soren was still speaking when I finally lifted my eyes. I didn't look at him like a man insulted. I looked at him like a man recognizing a name on a clipboard. Ravenport, I said casually, like I was tasting it. That's the waterfront project with the new venue opening, right? Soren's smile widened. That's right. Phase 2 integration, I said. Access control upgrades, temporary badge issues. I didn't say it with pride. I didn't say it with threat. I said it like a mechanic mentioning a squeal in your engine. Soren's smile froze for half a beat. Just half. But I saw it, because I was watching for it now. Brielle's laughter went first. Her eyes darted from Soren to me, suddenly unsure if she'd chosen the right god to worship. Lenora's smile slipped in the smallest way, like a mask shifting on sweaty skin. Soren recovered quickly because men like him train for recovery. Sure, he said smoothly. We have a lot of moving parts. I nodded. I'm sure. Then I tapped my screen once, twice, and let the glow reflect faintly on my fingertips. I didn't have to show anyone what I was looking at. I didn't have to threaten him. That would have been cheap. That would have been embarrassing. I just had to let the room realize something they hadn't considered. That the guy they'd decided was harmless. Handled systems that didn't care how much you smiled at a dinner table. Soren's eyes narrowed, not with fear, but with recalculation. The whole table went quiet in a way that felt different from before. Before, the silence had been crowded. Now, it was empty. No one laughed. No one moved. Even the forks seemed to hesitate. I watched every single smile drain like water pulled out of a sink. And in that quiet, with the chandelier glow and the perfect plates and the smell of wine and expensive food, I felt something else click into place. Because I realized the humiliation wasn't the main event. It was the opening act. And my wife, my perfectly composed wife, had been whispering to me not to embarrass everyone here while her phone buzzed in secret codes, and she hadn't even noticed that Soren's job and my job had just overlapped in a way that could ruin lives without anyone ever raising their voice. I sat back silently, exactly like she wanted, and for the first time that night, I smiled. Not because I was happy, because I finally understood what kind of story this was going to be. I stayed quiet the rest of the night because silence had suddenly become useful. People mistake silence for surrender. They think it means you ran out of words or courage, or both. What it really means, when done right, is that you've started listening for patterns instead of insults. The dinner limped forward after that. Conversation restarted in awkward spurts, like an engine that didn't quite trust itself anymore. Someone asked about dessert. Someone else commented on the view. Brielle laughed too loudly at nothing, trying to patch the mood with sound. Soren recalibrated. He didn't apologize. Men like him never do. Instead, he softened. Compliments replaced jokes. He leaned into charm, into mentorship energy, into the idea that he'd only been teasing. He even asked me a question about my work that sounded genuine if you didn't know how to listen. Lenora didn't look at me. She focused on her plate, then her wine, then Brielle. She nodded at the right moments. She smiled when someone else smiled. She performed relief. But her phone stayed face down, and it buzzed once more, just as everyone was standing to clear the table. That was when I knew. Not that she was cheating. That comes later. That's proof and confirmation and ugly logistics. What I knew in that moment was simpler. She wasn't on my side. People talk about betrayal like it's one big cinematic moment. It's not. It's a series of small decisions that all lean in the same direction. A whisper instead of a defense. A smile instead of a boundary. A phone turned face down instead of face up. I helped carry plates to the kitchen. I rinsed my glass. I thanked Brielle for dinner like a man who had enjoyed himself. Soren clapped me lightly on the shoulder as if we'd reached an understanding. "Good meeting you, Gideon," he said. "Small world?" I smiled back. "Smaller than people think." Lenora drove us home. She always did after family gatherings. She said it helped her decompress. I let her have the wheel and stared out the window at the dark, passing storefronts, the reflections sliding over the glass like ghosts. "You okay?" she asked after a few minutes, too casual. "Fine," I said. "Why wouldn't I be?" She hesitated, then laughed softly. "I just didn't want things to get awkward back there." "They didn't," I almost said. "They got informative." But I kept that thought to myself. I'd learned something important at the table. Confrontation would only help her rewrite the narrative. Silence, on the other hand, forced people to fill the gaps themselves. At home, she kissed my cheek quickly, already half turned away. "I'm exhausted," she said. "Long day tomorrow." Her phone buzzed again as she set it on the counter. I watched her pick it up a little too fast, her thumb already moving before she even looked at the screen. "Who's that?" I asked, gently, not accusing, curious, like a man who trusted his wife. "Brielle," she said, without missing a beat. "She's freaking out about Soren's schedule this week." That was mistake number one. Because Brielle never freaked out about schedules. She outsourced stress the way other people outsourced laundry. I nodded. "Tell her to relax. He seems like a guy who can handle pressure." Lenora smiled, relieved. She went to the bedroom to change, phone in hand. I stayed in the kitchen longer than necessary, wiping an already clean counter, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. The house felt normal. That was the unsettling part. Later, in bed, she turned away from me quickly, claiming a headache. The glow of her phone reflected faintly on the wall before she tucked it under her pillow. I stared at the ceiling and counted the small sounds. Her breathing, a car passing outside, the click of her phone locking. Sleep didn't come. Not because I was angry, because my mind had started reorganizing things. I woke before dawn and did what I always did when something felt off. I worked, not in a dramatic way, not in a secret lair way. Just quiet, methodical attention to details I normally skimmed. Coffee, laptop, my work dashboard. Most people think access control is about cameras. It's not. Cameras are just eyes. The real story is in the doors. Who opens them? When? How often? With whose permission? I didn't search for Lenora. That would have been emotional, sloppy. I searched for Ravenport. Waterfront venue, Phase 2. There it was, still sitting in my assigned queue, flagged for follow-up. The upgrade schedule had shifted twice in the last month. Late-night access windows. Temporary credentials extended longer than usual. That wasn't illegal, just lazy, or entitled. I scanned the access logs out of habit more than suspicion. Names, times, doors. Nothing jumped out at first. Then I noticed the escort fields. Temporary badges required a sponsor. Someone permanent. Someone with authority. The same name appeared again and again next to those late-night entries. Calder Wren. I recognized it because I'd seen it before, scribbled on a clipboard during a site walk. Operations, confident stride, the kind of man who assumed he belonged everywhere. I closed the laptop and rubbed my eyes. This still wasn't proof. It was coincidence, professional overlap, the kind of thing you don't build a story on. So I didn't. Instead, I went to the garage. Lenora's car smelled faintly different when I opened the door. Not perfume, something sharper, cheaper, a cologne that tried too hard to be clean. On the passenger floor mat, partially hidden under a receipt, was a black hair tie. Lenora never wore black hair ties. I didn't pick it up. I didn't photograph it. I didn't confront her with it like a man in a bad movie. I left it where it was, because if you move the pieces too early, you never see who put them there. That evening, Lenora said she had to check on something for work. A venue issue, short notice. She apologized in advance, which was new. "I won't be late," she said. She wore the jacket she liked when she wanted to be taken seriously, the one she said made her feel powerful. I waited 10 minutes after she left. Then I grabbed my keys. The waterfront wasn't far. That was part of its charm. Old warehouses dressed up as progress, exposed brick pretending to be history. The venue sat like a polished tooth along the waterline, all glass and confidence. I parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest. I didn't sneak. I didn't hide. I moved like a man who had been there before, because I had. The service entrance was lit. A security guard leaned against the wall, scrolling his phone. He looked up when he saw me squinting. "Hey," he said. "You with—" "Phase 2, I said, lifting my badge just enough to flash color, not long enough to invite inspection. "I'm late." He frowned, then shrugged. "Door's been acting weird anyway." Of course it had. Inside, the air smelled like new paint and expensive ambition. Footsteps echoed. Somewhere deeper in the building, music played softly. Someone testing acoustics. I stayed near the edges where contractors belong. I checked my watch. I checked my phone. I watched reflections in glass instead of faces. That's when I saw her. Not clearly at first. Just the movement, the posture, the way she tilted her head when she listened. Lenora stood near a restricted corridor, her back to me, her hand resting lightly on a man's arm. Not affectionate, familiar. He leaned in to say something. She laughed. Not her public laugh. The quiet one she used at home when she was relaxed. They moved together through a door marked "Staff Only." I didn't follow. I didn't need to. 5 minutes later, I checked the access log on my phone. The system updated in near real time. Temporary badge. Sponsored by Calder Wren. Entry granted. The timestamp matched exactly. I stood there, alone in a half-finished corridor, listening to the hum of a building that thought it was safe. That was the moment the story stopped being about embarrassment. That was the moment it became about architecture. Because I understood then that Lenora hadn't just lied to me. She'd borrowed someone else's access to do it. And men who borrow access always forget one thing. Someone else owns the doors. I went home without them noticing I'd ever been there. That part surprised me later. How easy it was to step back into my life like nothing had shifted. The same streetlights, the same driveway oil stain shaped like a continent, the same front door that opened with a familiar resistance in the hinge. I half expected the house to feel different, guilty, exposed. It didn't. Lenora came home just before midnight. I was already in bed, lights off, breathing slow. She slipped in quietly, showered longer than usual, then slid under the covers without touching me. The mattress dipped. The air smelled like soap layered over something else. I kept my eyes closed. The next morning, she kissed my cheek like she always did when she was running late. A light, efficient kiss. The kind you give someone you trust, won't ask questions. "I'll call you later," she said. She didn't. Instead, she sent a text around noon. Running behind. Might be late again. Don't wait up. No heart emoji. No apology. That afternoon, I took a different route home from a service call and passed the waterfront again. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I just noted the activity. Trucks, temporary fencing, banners being installed. The place was gearing up for something public. Big enough to need donors. Big enough to need optics. That night, while Lenora showered, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop again. This time, I didn't look for her. I didn't look for messages or photos or clues that would confirm what I already knew. That kind of confirmation only feeds the part of you that wants to explode. I looked for systems. Ravenport's venue contract was clean on the surface. Too clean. The kind of cleanliness that comes from confidence, not care. They'd accelerated timelines, extended temporary credentials, deferred some mandatory training refreshers to post-opening. That wasn't illegal. It was normal for companies that believed consequences only applied to other people. Calder Wren's name appeared everywhere once I knew how to look. Escort approvals, override requests, after-hours access justifications that all said the same thing in slightly different words. Operational necessity. I leaned back in my chair and smiled, just a little. Operational necessity is the phrase people use when they assume no one will ever audit them. I checked the event calendar tied to the venue. There it was. A ribbon-cutting gala scheduled for the end of the week. Donors, media, city officials, the kind of night where everyone smiles because cameras demand it. Lenora's department was listed under event coordination. I closed the laptop. The plan didn't arrive fully formed. Plans like that never do. They grow the way mold grows, quietly, in corners, feeding on things other people ignore. I didn't confront Lenora. I didn't freeze her out. I didn't suddenly become cold or cruel or suspicious. I became observant. I noticed how she changed outfits twice before leaving now, how she charged her phone in the car instead of the house, how she stopped asking about my day. I noticed how Brielle texted her more often, short messages, no punctuation, urgent. I noticed how Soren's name came up casually in conversation, like a brand you were supposed to admire without question. Soren says the gala's going to be huge, Brielle told us over dinner one night. Ravenport's putting everything into this. Lenora nodded, eyes bright. It's going to look incredible. They spoke like partners, like co-conspirators. I sat there eating slowly, thinking about doors and logs and the way people move differently when they believe they're protected. 2 days later, I made my first move. Not against Lenora, against Calder. I didn't follow him home like a stalker. I didn't wait in the shadows. I picked a place where confrontation would stay contained and witnesses would matter. A parking structure attached to a mixed-use building near the waterfront. Bright lights, cameras everywhere, concrete that amplified sound. I waited in my car and watched him arrive. Calder parked like a man who had never worried about consequences. Slightly crooked, too close to the line. His SUV gleamed under the lights, still carrying the dealership smell of money he hadn't fully earned yet. I got out and walked toward him as he stepped away from the vehicle, keys in hand. "Calder," I said. He turned, already irritated at being interrupted. That irritation shifted when he saw my face. Not recognition, calculation. "Do I know you?" he asked. "Indirectly," I said. "We've shared some doors." He frowned. "You with Ravenport?" "Sometimes," I said. "Sometimes Ravenport is with me." That was enough to unbalance him. Not fear, annoyance. Men like Calder hated ambiguity. "Look," he said, glancing around. "If this is about a work issue—" I closed the distance and slapped him, not hard enough to injure, hard enough to surprise. The sound cracked sharp against the concrete, echoing up the levels of the garage. Calder staggered back a step, eyes wide, hand flying to his cheek. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he shouted. I leaned in close enough that he could smell me. Coffee, oil, ordinary life. You don't touch what isn't yours, I said quietly. And you don't borrow access you don't understand. His breathing sped up, not from pain, from fear he didn't want to admit to. You're making a mistake, he said. You have no idea who— I know exactly who, I said. You think you're protected because someone higher up smiles at you. You think rules bend when money leans on them. I stepped back and gestured toward his car. He turned just in time to see the rear window. Bright vinyl letters clung to the glass, impossible to miss under the garage lights. Check your mirrors. They weren't permanent. They could be peeled off in minutes. That was the point. A message, not destruction. Calder stared at it, chest rising and falling fast. You can't do this, he said. I already did, I replied. And this is the smallest version. He looked back at me then, really looked. What do you want? I smiled, thin and calm. Distance. From what? From my wife, I said. From my systems. From any door that opens because you asked nicely. He laughed, sharp and brittle. You're nothing, he said. You know that, right? I leaned closer again. You made one mistake tonight, I said. You assumed I came here angry. I straightened. I came here prepared. I walked away before he could say anything else. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I heard his phone ring as I reached my car. I knew who he was calling. Not Lenora. Not security. Soren. And that was when the shape of the whole thing finally revealed itself. Because Calder wasn't afraid of me. He was afraid of disappointing the man who had given him permission to break rules in the first place. I drove home with my windows down, the night air cool against my face, and I understood something important. The dinner table hadn't been a coincidence. It had been a test, and now that test was over. I didn't sleep that night, not because my heart was racing, not because I was replaying the slap or the look on Calder's face. That part was already done, already filed away as something that couldn't be taken back and didn't need to be. I didn't sleep because a pattern had finally completed itself. Once you see the shape of something, you can't unsee it. Every earlier moment rearranges itself around that shape, snapping into place like pieces that had been waiting for permission. The dinner table, the laughter, the way Soren had pushed just enough, never too far. The way Lenora had warned me, not him. The way Calder had panicked, not at me, but at Soren. It wasn't chaos. It was hierarchy. I woke before sunrise and made coffee I didn't drink. The house was quiet in that thin, honest way it only ever was when Lenora wasn't performing for anyone. I sat at the table and let the silence do its work. Soren wasn't just Brielle's new boyfriend. He was the spine. Calder worked because Soren allowed him to. Lenora moved because Calder escorted her. Brielle smiled because Soren funded the room. And I, apparently, was supposed to stay small so none of that had to be acknowledged. The family dinner hadn't been about humiliation for fun. It had been a calibration. A way to see if I'd bark, or bite, or roll over. I'd rolled over. Publicly. And that had been the wrong answer. Lenora came home late again the next evening. She smelled like a hotel lobby, polished, artificial calm layered over fatigue. She talked too much, filling space with harmless details, the way people do when they're afraid silence might start asking questions. Soren's been under a lot of pressure, she said casually while setting her bag down. This gala means a lot to him, to Brielle. I looked up from my phone. I'm sure. She watched my face closely, trying to read something. I gave her nothing. What's that supposed to mean? She asked. Exactly what it sounds like. She laughed, just a little. You're being weird. No, I thought. I'm being accurate. Later, while she showered, her phone buzzed on the counter. Once, then again. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to anymore. Because the proof I was looking for wasn't in her messages. It was in the way everyone else behaved around Soren. The next morning, I got an email from my supervisor. Access update. Temporary suspension pending review. No explanation, no warning, just a clean, professional lockout. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then smiled. There it was. That was Soren's move. He couldn't threaten me directly. Men like him never do. They apply pressure sideways, through channels, through reviews, through systems that pretend to be neutral. I wasn't angry, I was impressed. He'd identified the correct threat. I grabbed my jacket and drove to the waterfront. The venue was louder now. Banners hung from temporary frames. Caterers rolled carts through service entrances. Staff moved with purpose, wearing matching badges and matching stress. I approached the side entrance and scanned my badge out of habit. Red light. Access denied. The guard frowned. Sorry, man. Orders. Whose? I asked calmly. He hesitated. Came down this morning. Of course it did. I nodded and stepped back, letting him think he'd won a small victory. I walked away slowly, then circled the building, counting doors, noting which ones had been propped open for convenience. People get careless before big events. They assume the rules will bend one last time. Behind the venue, near the service alley, I spotted a familiar face. Brielle. She stood with Soren, her hand resting possessively on his arm, laughing at something he'd said. They looked perfect together, money and admiration, locked in orbit. I stayed far enough away that they couldn't see me, close enough to watch. Calder emerged from a side door moments later, his confidence noticeably dimmer than it had been days ago. He spoke quickly to Soren, low and urgent. Soren listened without nodding, his expression cool, unreadable. Then Soren said something that made Calder stiffen. Soren didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Calder glanced around, eyes scanning the alley like a trapped animal. For half a second, his gaze passed over me. He looked away immediately. That was when I knew. Calder wasn't just afraid of losing his job. He was afraid of being cut loose. Men like Calder survive by attachment. They orbit power. When the gravity weakens, they panic. I left before they could notice me and drove home. Lenora was already there, pacing the living room, phone in hand. Why didn't you tell me? She demanded the moment I stepped inside. Tell you what? That you were involved with Ravenport, she said, voice tight. That you worked on their systems. I set my keys down slowly. You never asked. That's not fair, she snapped. This is affecting people, real people. I met her eyes. Like me? She flinched, just slightly. You embarrassed Soren, she said. He doesn't forget things like that. There it was. Not you embarrassed me. Not you were hurt. You embarrassed Soren. I nodded. Good to know. Her voice dropped. You need to stop whatever you're doing. I tilted my head. Am I doing something? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it. Didn't answer. For the first time, she looked unsure. That night, she slept facing me, eyes open, pretending not to watch my breathing. I lay still and thought about the gala, about donors and cameras and compliance clauses, about how access logs don't care who you're sleeping with, and about how Soren had tried to lock me out of my own work without realizing something important. You can revoke a badge. You can't revoke knowledge. The gala was 2 days away, and everyone involved believed they still had time to fix things. They were wrong. The day before the gala moved faster than it should have. That's how you know pressure is real. Time doesn't slow down like it does in movies. It compresses. Conversations overlap. Decisions get made without paperwork. People start saying yes just to make the noise stop. I spent that morning doing something Soren hadn't anticipated. Nothing. I didn't show up at the venue. I didn't call my supervisor. I didn't send emails defending myself or asking questions that would leave a trail. I let the suspension sit there like a loose wire no one wanted to touch. Instead, I went back through my notes. not digital ones. The kind you build in your head when you've walked the same corridors enough times to remember which doors stick and which ones close too softly. I knew where the cameras didn't quite overlap. I knew which access points had been installed in a rush, which readers lagged half a second before logging. Not flaws, just reality. Systems don't fail because they're bad. They fail because people assume they don't need to be watched. Lenora left early, dressed better than usual. The gala dress hung from the back of the closet like a promise she'd already cashed in. "You're not coming, right?" she asked, pretending it was casual. "No," I said. "I don't think I'd fit the theme." She laughed too quickly. "Good." She kissed my cheek and left without looking back. By late afternoon, the waterfront was locked into performance mode. I could feel it from across the city, the kind of energy that only shows up when reputations are about to be photographed. I arrived just after sunset, not through the front, not through any door with a red carpet nearby. I parked in the same mixed-use garage as before, one level down from where Calder had stood, looking small and furious. His SUV was gone. I wondered if he'd scraped the vinyl letters off yet, or if he'd driven around all day knowing someone else had touched something he thought he owned. Inside the venue, the air was colder, climate-controlled, controlled in every way that mattered. Staff moved quickly, radios chirping. Security was tighter now, but tighter doesn't mean smarter. It just means louder. I stayed where I belonged, near the service corridors, the places that never make it into event photos. I kept my head down, my pace steady, my hands visible. The badge on my jacket was old, but real. No one stopped me. People see what they expect to see. I heard the crowd before I saw it. Laughter rolling in waves, glasses clinking, a microphone squealing briefly, then settling. The gala had begun. I waited. Timing is everything when you're dealing with systems. You don't flip switches when no one's watching. You flip them when everyone is. I stepped into a small operations room just off the main floor. Screens lined the wall, each showing a different camera feed. Doors, corridors, the service alley, the stage. I wasn't supposed to be there anymore. That was fine. I didn't touch the system. I didn't log in. I didn't do anything that would look like sabotage. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. One message, pre-written, drafted days ago, clean, factual, boring in the way that terrifies executives. Subject, restricted access log. Immediate review required no accusations, no commentary, just attachments. Time-stamped entries showing Lenora's badge entering restricted areas after hours. Sponsored by Calder, multiple dates, patterns, notes about escort requirements and insurance clauses tied to occupancy. I added one sentence in the body. These entries occurred during restricted windows tied to event insurance compliance. That was it. I sent it to the compliance address listed in the Ravenport contract. CC'd the venue's risk officer. CC'd my supervisor. I didn't send it to Soren. Men like him don't get warned. They get bypassed. Within seconds, the room changed. Not visually, energetically. Radios crackled. One of the security supervisors frowned at her screen. Another leaned closer, lips moving as he read something on his tablet. I stepped back into the corridor before anyone thought to ask who I was. On the main floor, the effect spread like a cold. Calder was the first to feel it. I saw him near the bar, laughing too loudly, when a security lead touched his arm and spoke into his ear. Calder's smile faltered. He nodded, trying to maintain composure, but his eyes darted. He glanced toward the service corridor, toward me, then away. Soren was on stage, mid-speech, hand resting confidently on the podium. He spoke about growth, about community, about vision. His phone buzzed on the podium. Once, then again. He ignored it at first, then his cadence slipped. Just a fraction. Enough. Someone off stage gestured urgently. Soren's jaw tightened. He leaned into the microphone and wrapped up faster than planned, applause rising on autopilot. Behind the scenes, people moved. Doors closed that weren't supposed to close yet. Radios chirped more sharply. A donor frowned, checking his watch. Lenora stood near the edge of the crowd, eyes scanning. She spotted Calder being guided away from the floor, his posture rigid, his confidence collapsing inward. Her gaze snapped to the service corridor. She saw me. The color drained from her face so quickly it looked like a trick of the light. She started toward me, weaving through people, heels clicking too loud. I didn't move. Security intercepted Calder near the maintenance exit, the same door that had been propped open earlier. Someone had closed it. Calder's voice rose, sharp with panic, hands gestured. A tablet was thrust in his face. Soren appeared moments later, no longer smiling, his composure cracking under the weight of unreadable consequences. He looked at Calder the way men look at investments that have just gone bad. Lenora reached me then, breathless. "What did you do?" she whispered. I looked past her at the stage, at the banners, at the donors pretending not to stare. "I sat back," I said. "Just like you asked." Behind her, Calder's voice broke. Not crying, bargaining. Security shifted, closing ranks. Soren caught my eye across the room. For the first time, he didn't look amused. He looked hunted. Lenora turned to follow my gaze, realization hitting her too late. I stepped back into the corridor and walked away as the gala unraveled behind me. Smiles collapsing, whispers igniting, phones lifting to record what no one would ever fully explain. I didn't wait to see how far it fell. I didn't need to, because the doors were already closing, and this time none of them had my name on them. I didn't run. Running is for people who think they've done something wrong. I walked, down the corridor, past a pair of double doors that now required a code no one was typing fast enough. Past a catering cart abandoned at an angle like someone had let go of it mid-thought. The sound from the gala followed me, voices rising, laughter breaking apart, the soft panic of people realizing something expensive was going wrong and they didn't know why. Behind me, Lenora said my name. Not loudly, not angrily, the way you say it when you want time to rewind. "Gideon, please." I stopped, but I didn't turn around right away. I watched my reflection in the brushed steel of an elevator door. I looked exactly the same as I had that morning. Same jacket, same posture, same calm. That was the part she couldn't understand. When I turned, her face was pale, makeup perfect but useless against fear. She looked smaller without the crowd, without the lights. "What did you send?" she asked. "Information," I said. "You can't just, this will destroy people." I nodded once. "Yes." Her mouth opened, closed. She took a step closer, lowering her voice. "Soren will fix this." That almost made me laugh. "Soren doesn't fix audits," I said. "He dodges them." Tonight, he ran out of room. From the far end of the corridor came raised voices. Calder again. Louder now, desperate. "I didn't do anything wrong," he was saying. "I was told." Someone cut him off. A tablet screen flashed. A finger jabbed at dates and times. Lenora flinched. "You knew," she said suddenly. "You knew about us." I held her gaze. "I knew about doors." She reached for my arm. I stepped back. "That's over," I said. "Whatever you think we were standing on, it's gone." She shook her head, panic creeping into anger. "You're not innocent in this." "I never said I was." The shouting grew closer. Security moved Calder past the corridor entrance, his tie loosened, his face blotchy with sweat and disbelief. When he saw me, something in him snapped. "This is him!" Calder shouted. "This is the guy I told you about." Hands grabbed his arms. He struggled, not violently, just enough to show everyone he was losing control. Soren appeared behind him, jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. He didn't look at Calder. He looked at me. No insults, no threats, just calculation collapsing into rage. "Who are you?" he demanded. I stepped forward before Lenora could speak. "I'm the man who installs the locks," I said, "and the man who noticed you stop checking who had the keys." For a moment, the corridor went quiet. Then a security lead spoke, calm and final. "Sir, we need you to come with us. Not to jail, to a room without cameras, to paperwork, to questions that would never stop asking themselves." Calder sagged as they pulled him away. Soren didn't move. He stood there, staring at me like he wanted to memorize my face for later. "There will be consequences," he said. I nodded. There already are. Lenora stood frozen between us, realizing for the first time that there was no side she could stand on where she'd be safe. The sound from the gala swelled again as doors opened, confusion spilling out, guests murmuring, phones held high. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else started recording. Soren was guided toward the opposite end of the corridor, not escorted, invited. That was how it always started. Lenora turned to me one last time. "You didn't have to do this." I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing pull me back. "You told me not to embarrass anyone," I said. "I didn't." I stepped past her and pushed through the service exit into the night. Cold air hit my face. The water beyond the venue reflected the lights in broken lines, shaking with every ripple. Behind me, the gala fractured audibly. Raised voices, hurried footsteps, a microphone cutting out mid-announcement. I walked toward my car as sirens began somewhere far away. Not for crimes, not for arrests, but for control, for containment. I didn't look back, because the last thing I heard before the door closed behind me wasn't shouting. It was silence, the kind that follows when every door you thought was open suddenly locks at once. I reached the garage just as Calder did. They hadn't cuffed him. That would have been theatrical, wrong tone. Instead, they'd released him into the night with instructions, conditions, and the kind of warnings that follow a man longer than any patrol car. He stumbled out through the side door, phone pressed to his ear, voice breaking into something close to pleading. When he saw me, he froze like a deer that realizes too late the headlights are aimed directly at it. "Wait," he said, lowering the phone. "You got what you wanted. This is done." I didn't stop walking. He moved to block me, panic making him brave. "You don't understand. Soren's finished. I'm finished. They're pulling my credentials. My badge is inactive. My access. Everything." "I understand perfectly," I said. His eyes flicked toward the dark levels of the garage, then back to me. "Then call it off. Tell them it was a mistake." I shook my head. It wasn't. Something ugly crossed his face. "You think you won?" I stepped close enough that he had to lean back against his car, close enough that he could smell the night air on me, close enough that cameras would see nothing but two men talking. "I didn't come here to win," I said quietly. "I came here to finish." He swallowed. "What do you want from me?" I reached out and peeled one corner of the vinyl from his rear window. It came away easily, curling in my hand. "Nothing," I said. "That's the part you don't get. You don't matter anymore." His mouth opened. No sound came out. I stepped back and gestured to the vehicle. "But you should check your mirrors. A man without access gets very nervous on the drive home." I turned away before he could answer. Behind me, he slammed his fist into the hood of his car. Not hard enough to dent it. Hard enough to hurt. Good. As I drove out of the garage, I passed the front of the venue. Police lights washed the glass in blue and red, not arrests, just presence, damage control. The donors were leaving now, smiles gone, phones busy, stories already mutating into something poisonous. On the steps, I saw Soren one last time. He stood rigid, phone pressed to his ear, nodding sharply as someone spoke to him from the other end of a line that had just changed his life. He looked smaller without a microphone, without an audience trained to admire him. He felt my gaze and turned. For a moment, our eyes locked across the distance. No words, no gestures, just recognition. Then a security supervisor stepped between us, guiding him away from the entrance, toward questions that wouldn't care how much money he'd ever touched. I drove. Not fast, not slow. The city opened in front of me, ordinary and indifferent. Streetlights, empty intersections. A world that kept working even after people like Soren lost their grip on it. My phone buzzed once. Lenora. I didn't answer. At the next red light, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The venue lights glowed in the distance, fractured by movement, by chaos, by consequences, unfolding exactly where they were supposed to. The light turned green. I drove forward, and I didn't look back again.